but the studio did not want me. They tried everything to really keep me from being in the film because they felt that and they were right, that I was not of an equal stature to Paul Newman.
Hollywood legend Robert Redford, admired for decades as one of cinema's most iconic stars, has left fans speechless with a deeply personal revelation. Before his death, Redford reportedly opened up about 6 men who left an unforgettable mark on his life. Men he admitted he could never truly get over. This stunning confession peels back the curtain on hidden friendships, rivalries, and bonds that shaped both his career and his heart. So, who were these men, and why did they matter so much? Today, we uncover the truth. Robert Redford, The Final Curtain. With his piercing blue eyes and quiet magnetism, Robert Redford stood as one of the last living bridges to Hollywood's golden age. His name alone carried the weight of decades of artistry. An actor, director, and producer who shaped cinema while refusing to be shaped by its spotlight. Even at the height of his fame, he was never fully drawn to Los Angeles glitter. Instead, he built a world of his own in the mountains of Utah, where his sprawling Sundance Ranch became both a sanctuary and a legacy. As years passed, Redford embraced silence over spectacle. By 2018, he walked the red carpet for The Old Man and the Gun, hinting at retirement. 3 years later, he appeared with wife Sybille Sagers in Monaco, his final public sighting before retreating to cherished solitude among trees and mountains. Yet, even in retreat, he was never idle. Only months before his passing, Redford surprised many by stepping briefly out of retirement for a role in AMC's Dark Winds. Though he wasn't expected to speak, his dedication wouldn't let him stay silent. He delivered a few lines, a reminder of the natural talent that had once carried films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Way We Were into legend. He remained, until the very end, a performer who poured himself completely into his craft. But behind his remarkable career lay shadows of personal pain. The sudden death of his infant son in the late 1950s marked him forever. Later, his daughter Shauna lost her fiancé in a brutal, unsolved murder, a tragedy that haunted the family for decades. In 2020, Redford grieved again when his son James lost his battle with cancer. He called the loss immeasurable, and those close to him said the grief never left his eyes. For all his charm and strength, life had left scars that no amount of applause could erase. In his final years, Redford found comfort in his wife, his art, and his devotion to protecting the planet. Just days before his death, a short film surfaced of him urging world leaders to fight for sustainability. Even then, his voice carried the same conviction that once filled theaters around the world. Yet there was another truth, one rarely spoken. Redford had names etched deeply into his memory, people whose presence had shaped him in ways words could barely capture. Before his death, he revealed 6 individuals he admitted he could never get over. They were not faceless strangers or distant rivals, but trusted figures who once stood smiling beside him, leaving behind wounds that time refused to close. And today, we finally bring to light who they were. Stay with us as we begin with the first. Number 1, Sidney Pollack. Robert Redford worked with many directors across his long career. Some he admired, some he outgrew, and others he simply endured. Yet, among all of them, there was only one who seemed to speak to him on a level deeper than film, someone who understood the man behind the star. That person was Sidney Pollack. Their connection was not built solely on scripts or sets. It was an unshakable partnership, tested by jealousy, challenged by ego, and sealed by a kind of loyalty rare in Hollywood. Their paths first crossed in the early 1960s on the set of War Hunt. Pollack played a supporting role while Redford, still a rising actor, carried the promise of someone who would one day define an era. What began as a professional acquaintance soon grew into a friendship that carried them through decades of triumphs and storms. By the time they worked together on This Property is Condemned in 1966, it was clear something unusual had formed between them. Redford trusted Pollack in ways he didn't trust others, because Sidney never tried to control him. Instead, he stripped away the performance, searching for the person within. That bond deepened with Jeremiah Johnson in 1972 and The Way We Were a year later. But it was 3 Days of the Condor, and especially Out of Africa in 1985, that made their collaboration legendary. Pollack framed Redford not just as the handsome idol audiences adored, but as a man wrestling with loneliness, idealism, and desire. Each pause, each glance, each silence mattered under Pollack's lens. Redford once admitted he didn't need to explain himself on those sets. Sidney simply knew. But their closeness wasn't without turbulence. During the filming of Out of Africa, Redford grew visibly close to Meryl Streep, sharing moments of warmth that Pollack couldn't ignore. His jealousy burned quietly, turning the atmosphere tense. For Pollack, it wasn't about rivalry. It was about feeling displaced, perhaps even betrayed by the person who mattered most to him. Redford, caught in the middle, confessed he felt torn, trapped between comforting a friend and pursuing the truth of his performance. Yet this storm didn't break them. Instead, it carved their bond into something stronger, something that could survive anger and still find forgiveness. Redford invited Pollack out privately, and though no one ever knew the words they exchanged, their reconciliation was lasting. When the 1990s came, Redford shifted more toward directing, and Pollack encouraged him, respecting his need to grow. Their careers moved in different directions, yet they always returned to one another. That constancy made Pollack's illness in the mid-2000s especially devastating. As cancer consumed him, the roles reversed. The director who had guided Redford through countless on-screen storms now faced his own, and Redford could only sit beside him, powerless to rewrite the ending. When Sidney Pollack died in May 2008, Redford described the loss as like losing a limb. For weeks, he remained silent, and even years later, he admitted that every set felt emptier without his closest collaborator. He kept a photograph from the Out of Africa shoot. The two of them captured mid-conversation, unaware of the legacy they were building. Redford said he often looked at it for guidance, imagining what Sidney would have told him. Robert Redford gained much from fame, wealth, influence, and a lasting legacy. Yet, it also stripped pieces of his life away, slowly and mercilessly. And the greatest wound of all didn't come from Hollywood, but from within his own home. Let's find out how. Number 2. James Redford. His son James was never a star in the Hollywood sense. He didn't chase magazine covers, flashing cameras, or blockbuster roles. Yet for Robert Redford, James was larger than any leading man he ever portrayed. He was not only a son, but a confidant, someone who reflected back a truth deeper than fame could ever provide. In private, Redford often admitted that no critic, no co-star, no director had shaped him more profoundly than James. Born in 1962, James entered a world where privilege seemed assured. Outsiders assumed his father's legacy meant ease, but beneath the surface lay a fight that would define his life. From the beginning, James's liver was failing. His childhood wasn't measured by stages or premieres, but by doctors, treatments, and hospital rooms. By the time he reached his 30s, 2 transplants had kept him alive, each one a reminder of both fragility and resilience. And yet James never let illness become his story. He carried himself with humility, walking through hardship with grace that stunned those around him. Creativity ran through his veins as strongly as struggle, and instead of pursuing stardom, he turned to documentaries that exposed truths most would rather ignore. He explored addiction, mental health, corruption, and the fragile state of the environment. He wanted to make films that mattered, not to be remembered as Redford's son, but as a man who could move hearts through honesty. He also founded the James Redford Institute for Transplant Awareness, using his own suffering to spotlight the power of organ donation and the invisible battles so many endure. For Robert, watching this journey was humbling. He once admitted that no character he had played, no outlaw, no journalist, no revolutionary, was as difficult as being a father powerless against his child's pain. But admiration always carried with it a silent fear. Every phone call could be the one that ended the fight. And on October 16, 2020, that moment arrived. At just 58, James lost his battle with bile duct cancer. The announcement came quietly through the family. Redford didn't speak. He wandered the woods near his Utah home, walking beneath the open sky, searching for understanding where none existed. Friends say his grief lingers like a fog, soft, constant, and unshakable. Yet even in silence, he honors James. Redford supports environmental campaigns, funds projects that carry the same urgency James believed in, and continues backing films that give a voice to the vulnerable. In rare, fragile moments, he has confessed that James was better than me, kinder, wiser, stronger. To Robert, legacy is no longer about box office triumphs or critical acclaim. It is about carrying forward the light his son left behind. And in the heart of Robert Redford, that light still burns. Number 3. Mike Nichols. The story of Robert Redford's long-standing animosity toward Mike Nichols does not begin with a quiet dislike, but with an explosive humiliation that etched itself into his memory. By the late 1960s, Redford was already seen as a promising actor, handsome, talented, and ambitious, but his career had not yet reached the international heights he dreamed of. Then came the audition that could have changed everything, the role of Benjamin Braddock in The Graduate in 1967. For Redford, this was more than just another part. Playing Benjamin meant stepping into the very heart of American cinema at a time when Hollywood was reinventing itself. Nichols, fresh off his Broadway success and already cultivating the reputation of a sharp-eyed director, was looking for someone to embody youthful uncertainty. Redford walked in with confidence, but what unfolded was nothing short of devastating. Nichols dismissed him outright, telling him he could never play someone awkward or uncertain, that his looks and presence made it impossible. Behind the words lay a deeper sting, as Nichols reportedly went further, branding him a loser, a remark that sliced into Redford's pride. To a man whose self-belief was both his armor and his weapon, the insult was intolerable. That moment was not just rejection. It was public belittlement from a director who, in time, would be celebrated as one of the industry's greats. Redford left the audition room carrying not only disappointment, but a growing fire of resentment that would define their relationship for the rest of their lives. Years later, as Nichols cemented his place in Hollywood with films that won awards and critical acclaim, opportunities arose for the two men to work together. Redford refused them all. To outsiders, it looked like a curious career choice. Why turn away from a director of Nichols' caliber? But to Redford, the answer was simple. No success, no recognition could erase the sting of that audition room. Accepting collaboration would have meant surrendering to the very man who had humiliated him. The bitterness was never softened by time. Where others in Hollywood often reconciled after clashes, Redford's resentment remained sharp. Nichols's name, for him, was a reminder of the one wound his pride never healed from. It was not a fleeting grudge, but a permanent scar, one that shaped the way he chose his projects, the alliances he avoided, and the rivalries he carried in silence. So if time never softened Redford's grudge against Nichols, what would happen when another actor challenged him just as fiercely? Stay tuned. Number 4. Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman was not just another co-star in Robert Redford's long career. He became something closer to a mirror, a rival, and an ally all at once. Redford often spoke of Hoffman with rare affection, admitting that, after Paul Newman, Hoffman ranked as his second favorite man in the world. Yet their bond was never built on easy harmony. It was forged in the heat of artistic clashes, restless curiosity, and a friendship that thrived on tension as much as trust. Their most unforgettable collaboration came in 1976 with All the President's Men, a film that demanded both precision and passion. Playing Woodward and Bernstein, the two actors immersed themselves so completely in the unraveling of Watergate that it often felt less like acting and more like investigative reporting. They pored over scripts like seasoned journalists, dissecting lines, debating delivery, and questioning every detail until the boundaries between performance and reality blurred. The screen lit up with their chemistry, two minds colliding, challenging each other, and elevating the story into something greater than either could achieve alone. But this electricity did not come without sparks. Hoffman's dedication to method acting sometimes tested Redford's patience, pushing him to restrain himself in ways that left their exchanges charged with unspoken friction. Those moments of quiet resistance, however, often translated into magnetic energy on camera. It was a delicate balance, conflict that never broke them apart, but instead pushed them toward deeper authenticity in their craft. Off-set, they found surprising ways to unwind from the intensity. Redford once recalled how they would tear through the boulevards of Washington, D.C., engines roaring, the night air whipping past them as they raced against time and each other. These reckless rides were not just diversions but intimate escapes, moments where competition gave way to camaraderie. In the hum of the engines and the rush of speed, they shared fragments of themselves, thoughts on work, glimpses into private fears, and confessions about the strange weight of fame. What struck Redford most was Hoffman's razor-sharp intellect and his relentless passion for digging beneath the surface. Hoffman didn't simply argue. He forced Redford to reconsider, to reframe, to see their friendship as something far deeper than professional respect. It was a bond steeped in intensity, where confrontation and admiration walked hand in hand, leaving Redford with memories that were as invigorating as they were unsettling. But if late-night races and raw confessions defined his bond with Hoffman, what storm awaited with Newman? Keep watching. Number 5. Paul Newman. Paul Newman was the man Robert Redford called both his best friend and, at times, his greatest rival. Their connection was anything but ordinary, woven with admiration, envy, playful hostility, and a closeness that Hollywood still speculates about. To the public, their partnership in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969 and later The Sting in 1973 seemed effortless, the product of perfect casting. Yet behind the scenes, their chemistry was sharpened by competition. Newman had originally wanted the role of Sundance, the charming outlaw that catapulted Redford, then a relative unknown, into instant stardom. Accepting the part of Butch left Newman outwardly gracious, but beneath the surface lingered a flicker of jealousy, and Redford knew it. That mix of rivalry and affection fueled their off-screen antics. They were notorious pranksters, each trying to outdo the other. When Redford gifted Newman a Porsche that wouldn't start, Newman's revenge was merciless. He had the car crushed into a solid block of metal and returned it as a garden ornament. Neither man ever spoke of the joke again, as though their friendship had its own unspoken code, silent, mischievous, and binding. Beyond the pranks, there were subtler signs of an intimacy that drew endless whispers in Hollywood. Crew members recalled seeing Redford lean in close, whispering invitations meant only for Newman. Rumors swirled when insiders described Redford's dreams, haunting visions of Newman that left him restless, torn between desire and denial. Though their families lived near one another in Connecticut, giving their bond the appearance of domestic closeness, Redford sometimes wrestled with Newman's quiet detachment. Moments of affection he offered were not always returned, leaving him bruised and frustrated. Concealing irritation behind the polished smile audiences adored. Their friendship endured through shifting moods of rivalry, laughter, and silence. Years later, Redford invited Newman to star alongside him in A Walk in the Woods, hoping to recapture the magic of their legendary collaborations. Newman, weakened by age and health, had to decline. For Redford, it was a bitter disappointment, a missed chance to share the screen one last time. When Newman died in 2008, Redford's grief was unmistakable. He called him more valuable than any love he had ever known, a man who made life, and the country, better simply by being in it. Number 6. Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier was unlike anyone Robert Redford had ever met. Their paths crossed during the filming of Sneakers in 1992, but the connection they forged reached far beyond the boundaries of that single project. To Redford, Poitier was more than a legendary actor. He was a man of dignity, calm intelligence, and moral strength that few in Hollywood could match. In an industry dominated by ego and rivalry, Poitier carried himself with quiet grace, and Redford instantly recognized something rare, a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. On set, their dynamic became a delicate balance of energy and temperament. Redford's quick wit and restless drive found its counterpoint in Poitier's composed and thoughtful nature. Together, they created a rhythm that was as captivating off-camera as it was on-screen. Away from the spotlight, they often took long walks or spent evenings in quiet conversation, exchanging reflections on work, life, and the burdens of fame. These private moments cemented a bond that Redford would later describe as one of the most meaningful of his career. Yet, beneath the warmth of their friendship lay an invisible weight. Hollywood in that era was still marred by racial prejudice, and the sight of a white star openly displaying closeness with a black counterpart was often twisted or scrutinized. Redford, fully aware of this unspoken barrier, kept his admiration for Poitier within the bounds of respect, careful not to put his friend in a position that could invite misunderstanding. Still, his regard for Poitier never wavered. If anything, the restraint only deepened the sincerity of his affection. In interviews, Redford often spoke of Poitier with profound admiration, not just for his artistry, but for his character. He called him a moral compass, a man whose integrity illuminated every project he touched. Decades after Sneakers, Redford continued to honor their time together, recalling their conversations, their silences, and the wisdom Poitier quietly imparted. For Redford, this friendship was not defined by Hollywood glamour, but by genuine respect and gratitude. Sidney Poitier was not only a colleague who shared the screen, he was a figure who shaped how Redford understood loyalty, dignity, and the unspoken power of trust. So, what do you think truly defined Robert Redford's tangled mix of friendships, rivalries, and unspoken bonds in Hollywood? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe.